A homeschooling family of 6 vanished from their isolated Montana homestead in 2004, leaving behind half-prepared dinner, school lessons stopped mid-sentence, and a strange note about visiting relatives for a church retreat. But they never arrived. 6 years later, during a property survey before the abandoned land was sold for development, ground-penetrating radar revealed a disturbing pattern beneath the soil of their garden. Not random disturbances, but a perfect circle of objects surrounding what appeared to be human remains. When investigators carefully excavated the site, they found 6 textbooks arranged in a ritual-like pattern around the family's bodies. Each book was open to specific pages, containing a coded message that would finally reveal the truth about what happened to them. Hey there, welcome to Last Seen Stories family. Every day, we explore stories of unexplained disappearances and the shocking moments when the truth finally emerges. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Now, let's return to Montana, where a sister's determination to find the truth about her missing family is about to uncover something no one could have imagined. The morning sun cast long shadows across the overgrown path leading to the Walsh family homestead as Catherine Walsh made her way toward the weathered cabin. 6 years had passed since her brother Robert, his wife Natalie, and their 4 children had disappeared without explanation beyond a simple note left on their kitchen table. 6 years of questions without answers, 6 years of theories without proof. The gravel crunched beneath Kate's boots as she approached the abandoned property. 40 acres of isolation, bordered by pine forests and rolling hills, with the majestic Montana mountains rising in the distance. The log cabin, once meticulously maintained by her brother, now stood weathered and forlorn. Green moss crept the north-facing wall, shutters hung askew, their blue paint peeling like sunburned skin. The vegetable garden, where Natalie had grown produce for canning, was now an untamed wilderness of weeds and volunteer plants gone wild. Kate paused at the garden gate, its hinges rusted in perpetual welcome. In her hand, she clutched a set of keys, one for the cabin, one for the barn, one for the storage shed. They felt cold and heavy in her palm, unused for months since her last visit. She had been coming less frequently lately. The property had a way of keeping the wound fresh, preventing it from healing over with time's usual mercy. "I'm back, Bobby," she whispered, using the childhood nickname only she had been allowed to call her older brother. "I'm not giving up." The wind rustled through the tall brass as if in response. Kate took a deep breath and moved toward the cabin. She wouldn't go inside today. That could wait until after the memorial gathering she had planned for tomorrow, the 6-year anniversary of the disappearance. Instead, she walked the perimeter of the property, taking note of what needed repair, what could still be saved if anyone ever returned to this place. Most people in the nearby town of Pine Haven had accepted the theory that the Walsh family had joined some religious commune. The idea fit comfortably with what the townspeople thought they knew about the family: devout Christians who homeschooled their children and lived somewhat apart from modern society. But Kate knew better. Robert might have been devoted to his faith and determined to give his children an education aligned with their beliefs, but he wasn't the type to abandon his home, his land, his life without explanation. The truth was, the Walsh family had disappeared into thin air. Robert, Natalie, 13-year-old twins Alexander and Andrew, 10-year-old Sophia, and 7-year-old Benjamin gone, leaving dinner ingredients on the counter, school books open on the table, and a handwritten note that Kate had read so many times she had memorized every word. "Gone to visit Uncle Joseph for church retreat at Riverdale Camp. Back Tuesday. Please don't worry." By Robert. The note had been the first red flag. Uncle Joseph was real, a distant relative on their father's side who lived in Idaho. But the Walshes hadn't seen him in over a decade, and there was no Riverdale camp anywhere in the region. The handwriting looked like Robert's, but certain phrases, like "please don't worry," weren't expressions he ever used. Something about it had felt wrong from the start. As Kate completed her circuit of the property, she noticed fresh tire tracks in the rarely used driveway. Someone had been here recently, someone in a vehicle with a wider wheelbase than her compact car. She frowned, kneeling to examine the impressions in the soft earth. The tracks led toward the barn, then back out to the main road. Her phone chimed with a text message from Rebecca Winters, the local librarian who had been helping Kate research similar disappearances across the country. "Found something interesting in old newspaper archives. We'll bring to gathering tomorrow. Hope you're holding up okay." Kate texted back a quick thanks, then took one last look at the homestead before returning to her car. Tomorrow would bring the small group of people who still cared about what happened to the Walsh family. Tomorrow they would remember, and maybe, just maybe, they would find something new. The Pine Haven Community Center was modest but welcoming, its main meeting room transformed by Kate's careful arrangements. A folding table against one wall held photographs of the Walsh family: Robert with his quiet smile and steady eyes, Natalie with her long auburn hair often captured in mid-motion, the twins with their matching mischievous grins, Sophia with her serious expression and books always in hand, and little Benjamin with a smile that could light up the darkest room. Kate had arranged chairs in a loose circle, creating an intimate space for the small gathering she expected. On another table, she had placed items belonging to the missing family: Robert's leather-bound Bible, Natalie's hand-knitted scarf, drawings by the children, school projects preserved in clear plastic sleeves, and at the center, protected within a Ziploc bag, the note that had changed everything.
People began to arrive shortly before noon. Pastor Daniel Freeman came first, his once dark hair now streaked with gray, his face lined with the passage of time, but his eyes still kind. He embraced Kate warmly. "6 years," he said softly. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday." "And sometimes like a lifetime," Kate replied, accepting his embrace. Thomas Blackwood arrived next, his weathered face testimony to decades of Montana ranching. He had been the Walshes' nearest neighbor, though near was relative in this part of the country. His property began 2 miles down the road. "Kate," he said with a nod, never one for effusive greetings. But he had brought fresh baked bread from his wife, wrapped carefully in a checkered cloth. "Helen sends this, says feeding people is what neighbors do, even years later." Rebecca Winters arrived carrying a canvas tote bag filled with papers. The librarian's perpetually curious eyes scanned the room as she entered, taking in the photographs and memorabilia. "I've got some interesting finds," she said, patting her bag. "Old newspaper clippings, similar cases from other parts of the country, and something odd about that land." Sam Nichols, Robert's childhood friend who'd moved back to Pine Haven just a year before the disappearance, entered with his characteristic hesitancy. "Sorry I'm late," he mumbled, though he wasn't. "Traffic on Main Street." It was a weak joke. Pine Haven's Main Street rarely saw enough cars to qualify as traffic, but Kate appreciated the attempt at normalcy. The last to arrive was Deputy Amelia Rodriguez, still in uniform, though she had told Kate she was coming on her lunch break. Rodriguez had been newly assigned to the sheriff's department when the Walshes disappeared. She had been part of the initial investigation, and while she never said so directly, Kate suspected she had never fully accepted the department's conclusion that the family had left voluntarily. "I can only stay an hour," Rodriguez said, accepting a cup of coffee from Kate. "But I wanted to be here." Once everyone had settled into the circle of chairs, Pastor Freeman opened with a simple prayer, asking for comfort for those left behind, and for truth to prevail. Then Kate welcomed everyone, her voice steady despite the emotion tightening her throat. "Thank you all for coming. It means more than I can say that after 6 years, you still care about what happened to Robert, Natalie, and the children. Some of you knew them well. Some barely knew them at all, but have helped me keep their memory alive. Today isn't about mourning, though I do that every day, but about remembering who they were, and maybe finding some piece of the puzzle we've been missing all these years." Thomas Blackwood cleared his throat. "They were good people. Kept to themselves mostly, but always ready to help when needed. Robert helped me rebuild my barn roof that spring before they were gone. Worked alongside me for 3 days straight. Wouldn't take more than a thank you in payment. Rebecca brought meals to my mother when she was recovering from surgery, and she never pushed her religion on us, though everyone knew how devout she was. She just lived it, you know? Kindness without strings attached." Sam shifted in his chair. "I only reconnected with Robert a year or so before they disappeared. We'd been close as kids, drifted apart when I moved away for college, but it was like no time had passed when I came back. He was still the same steady, thoughtful guy, always thinking deeply about things." "The children were remarkable," Pastor Freeman said. "So well-spoken, curious about everything. That's what I remember most about their homeschooling. It wasn't about isolation or indoctrination like some folks in town whispered. It was about nurturing their natural curiosity within a framework of faith." Deputy Rodriguez had been quiet, but now she leaned forward. "I reviewed the case file again last week," she said, her voice professional but gentle. "The official conclusion remains that the family left voluntarily, based on the note and the lack of signs of struggle or foul play. But I've always had questions." "Like what?" Kate asked, hope flaring briefly. "Like why they left dinner half-prepared. Like why school books were open to lessons in progress. Like why none of their relatives in Idaho, Wyoming, or Colorado ever saw or heard from them. Like why Robert withdrew only a small amount of cash the day before, not enough for 6 people to start a new life somewhere." "And the note," Kate said, "that's always bothered me the most. Uncle Joseph exists, but they hadn't seen him in years, and there's no Riverdale camp anywhere in this part of the country. Plus, the phrasing was not like Robert at all." "May I see it again?" Rebecca asked, gesturing toward the protected note on the display table. Kate brought it over, and everyone leaned in to examine the simple message written in what appeared to be Robert's handwriting. "Gone to visit Uncle Joseph for church retreat at Riverdale Camp. Back Tuesday. Please don't worry. Robert." "I've analyzed his handwriting from other documents," Rebecca said, pulling papers from her tote bag. "Letters he wrote me, notes and books he borrowed from the library. It's similar, but there are subtle differences. See how the R in this letter he wrote me has a distinctive loop. The R in Robert on the note doesn't have that loop." "Could be explained by hurry, stress, writing conditions," Deputy Rodriguez cautioned. "Or someone trying to forge his handwriting," Thomas Blackwood said bluntly. The group fell silent, contemplating this possibility.
"I found something else," Rebecca continued, reaching into her bag again. "Kate, remember you mentioned Robert had been researching the history of the land before he bought it? I dug through the county archives and found something interesting." She spread a large map on the floor in the center of their circle.
This is a survey map from 1978, when the previous owner divided up his ranch. The parcel Robert bought in 2001 is here. She pointed to an area outlined in red. But look at these notations in the margins. Kate knelt beside the map, squinting at the faded pencil marks. Mining survey? Potential reserves? Preliminary testing positive? Was there mining on the property? Not active mining, but geological surveys from the 1970s indicated the presence of rare earth minerals. Nothing was ever developed because extraction technology wasn't cost-effective then. But now those minerals are worth a fortune. They're used in everything from smartphones to electric car batteries. Deputy Rodriguez's expression sharpened. Was Robert aware of this? I don't know, Kate said slowly. He never mentioned it to me. He bought the land because he loved the isolation, the beauty, the ability to be self-sufficient. Rebecca pulled out another document. Here's something else. 3 months before the disappearance, a company called Horizon Development Corporation filed paperwork to create a new subsidiary focused on mineral rights acquisition in this county. They specifically targeted properties in this geological formation. Her finger traced a line that ran directly through the Walsh property. Thomas Blackwood's face darkened. That reminds me, I saw unfamiliar vehicles on the road near their place a few times that spring. Thought maybe they were lost tourists or maybe people interested in the Miller property that was for sale further down. Black SUVs, company logo on the door that I couldn't make out. Did you tell the sheriff's department this during the investigation? Thomas looked uncomfortable. I mentioned it to Deputy Lawson. He said he'd make a note of it, but I never heard anything more. Lawson? Rodriguez muttered, making a note in her small notebook. He left the department about 5 years ago, moved to Arizona, I think. Kate's mind was racing. So you're saying there might be valuable minerals under Robert's land, and a company was interested in acquiring it around the time they disappeared. It's circumstantial, Rodriguez cautioned, but worth looking into. I'd need to check if there were any official approaches to your brother about selling. I have his financial records. My parents got court approval to manage his affairs after it became clear they weren't coming back quickly. I've been handling things since Mom and Dad moved to Florida. There's nothing about offers to buy in what I've seen, but I haven't gone through everything. Rebecca pulled out more papers from her seemingly bottomless tote bag. I also found these, she said, spreading photographs on the floor beside the map. These are from the community picnic the weekend before they disappeared. I was digitizing the library's local history collection and found them. The photos showed the Walsh family at the annual Pine Haven 4th of July celebration. Robert flipping burgers at the grill, Natalie supervising a 3-legged race, the twins playing horseshoes, Sophia reading under a tree, Benjamin with his face painted like a tiger. They look so normal, happy, Sam said softly. Wait, Rebecca said, pointing to one photo, showing the family gathered for a group picture. Behind them, partially visible, was a black SUV parked at the edge of the park. Isn't that like the vehicles you mentioned, Thomas? Thomas leaned in, squinting. Could be. Can't see if there's a logo from this angle. Look at this one, Rebecca continued, pointing to another photo, where Robert stood talking to a man in business attire, conspicuously formal for a community picnic. The man's back was to the camera, but he appeared to be showing Robert something on a tablet or folder. I don't recognize him, Kate said, studying the photo. Me neither, said Pastor Freeman, and I make it a point to know everyone who comes to community events. Deputy Rodriguez took out her phone and photographed the picture. I'll run this through our system, see if we can enhance it enough to identify him. Kate suddenly remembered something. Robert's journal, she said. After they disappeared, I found his personal journal in his desk drawer. The sheriff's department looked at it, but dismissed it as mostly religious reflections and homeschooling notes. But there were entries from those last few weeks that seemed cryptic. I couldn't make sense of them at the time. "Do you still have it?" Rodriguez asked. "At my apartment. I kept everything important that wasn't needed at the homestead." "Kate," Rebecca said slowly, looking at another photograph, "what books were the children studying at the time they disappeared? Do you remember?" Kate thought back. The twins were deep into earth science that summer, geology specifically. Sophia was studying American history, colonial period. Benjamin was just learning to read independently, but he loved his children's Bible stories and a beginner's astronomy book that showed the constellations.
Rebecca pointed to a photo showing the family's bookshelf in the background of a birthday celebration for one of the twins. "Look at how these books are arranged. They're not in alphabetical order or by subject. This shelf here, it has one geology book, one history book, one astronomy book, and one Bible, arranged in a semicircle. Doesn't that seem odd?" The group leaned in, studying the photo. "Could be coincidence," Sam suggested. "Maybe," Rebecca conceded. "But librarians notice book arrangements. This looks deliberate to me." "We need to check the journal," Deputy Rodriguez said decisively, "and I think we should visit the homestead, take a fresh look at everything." "I was just there this morning," Kate said. "Someone's been on the property recently, fresh tire tracks leading to the barn." Rodriguez's expression sharpened. "Then we should definitely check it out, today if possible." The gathering concluded with a new sense of purpose. They agreed to meet at Kate's apartment in an hour to review the journal, then proceed to the homestead. As people began to disperse, Thomas Blackwood hung back, waiting until he and Kate were alone. "There's something else," he said, his voice low. "The night before they disappeared, I was out checking my fences. Had a problem with coyotes getting at the chickens. I saw lights at your brother's place, out by the garden. Thought it was strange, him being out there after dark. I almost drove over to check, but then the lights went away, and I figured he was just dealing with some night critter in his vegetables. But now you're not so sure." Thomas shook his head. "The lights were wrong. Too bright, too steady for a flashlight. And there were multiple sources arranged in some kind of pattern. I told myself I was imagining things, but now hearing about these books arranged in patterns, about mining surveys," he trailed off. "Thank you for telling me," Kate said, touching his arm gently. "Every piece helps." As Thomas left, Kate stood alone in the community center, surrounded by the memories of her missing family. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of something beyond grief and confusion. Not hope, exactly, but purpose, determination. Someone knew what happened to the Walsh family, and she was going to find out who. Kate's apartment was small, but meticulously organized, a stark contrast to the abandoned chaos of the homestead. While Deputy Rodriguez and Rebecca settled at her kitchen table, Kate retrieved a cardboard box from the top shelf of her closet. Inside, wrapped in acid-free tissue paper, was Robert's journal, a simple leather-bound book with his initials stamped on the cover. "I read it so many times," Kate said, placing it on the table. "But I was always looking for clues about where they might have gone, not why they disappeared." Rodriguez opened the journal carefully. The early pages contained what one might expect: Robert's reflections on scripture, notes about the children's educational progress, observations about the land and seasons, sketches for projects around the homestead. But about 3/4 through, the entries began to change. April 15th, 2004. Unusual visitor today. Claims to represent a development company interested in the future of the region. Offered to buy our land for twice market value. Told him we're not interested. N worried about how persistent he was. April 30th, 2004. Same company, different representative today. Offer now 2.5x market value. Something doesn't feel right. They won't say exactly what they want the land for. Just talk about progress and regional development. Ask around town, no one else has been approached. May 18th, 2004. Found survey markers at the north corner of our property. I didn't place them. Remove them. Felt like I was being watched. June 7th, 2004. N found unfamiliar tire tracks near the garden. Children reported seeing a drone over the property while doing their nature studies. Trying not to alarm them, but have asked them to stay close to the house. June 21st, 2004. Third visit. Man called himself Lucas Montgomery from Horizon Development. When I refused again, his demeanor changed. Said, "Mr. Walsh, sometimes progress can't be stopped. Better to benefit from it than stand in its way." Felt threatening. Checked our emergency preparations tonight while the children slept. The entries continued, documenting escalating concerns. Then came a page where the handwriting changed slightly, becoming more hurried. July 2nd, 2004. Considering reaching out to Uncle Joseph in Idaho. Haven't spoken in years, but he's experienced with land disputes. Need to weigh options carefully. The children's safety comes first. July 5th, 2004. Decision made. If anything happens, remember Psalm 40, verse 2. The children know their parts. N is afraid but resolute. If anyone finds this, look where the light touches at midsummer sunset. That's the last entry, Kate said. They disappeared on July 6th. The reference to Uncle Joseph, Rodriguez noted, that matches the note but in a completely different context.
And Psalm 42, Rebecca said, reaching for Robert's Bible from the memorial display. She flipped through it quickly. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. A pit, Sam said. Could that be referring to something buried? And that last entry, Rodriguez said, the children know their parts, like they were preparing something together. Look where the light touches at midsummer sunset, Kate repeated. Midsummer would have been around June 21st. That's when he reported the threatening visit from Montgomery. The garden, Kate said suddenly. Thomas mentioned seeing strange lights in the garden the night before they disappeared, and the fresh tire tracks I saw yesterday led toward the barn, which overlooks the garden. Rodriguez closed the journal and stood. I think we need to visit the homestead. Now. The drive to the Walsh property took 20 minutes, the small convoy of vehicles raising dust along the rural road. Kate led the way, with Rodriguez following in her patrol car, then Rebecca and Sam together in Rebecca's sedan. Thomas Blackwood met them at the turnoff, having come directly from his ranch. As they approached the homestead, Kate immediately noticed something different. The padlock on the front gate was missing, the chain hanging loose. I locked this yesterday, she said, as they gathered at the entrance. Someone's been here since then. Rodriguez drew her service weapon. Stay behind me, she instructed. If someone is trespassing, they could be dangerous. They proceeded cautiously up the driveway. No vehicles were visible, but the fresh tire tracks Kate had noticed earlier were now more pronounced, with several sets leading toward both the cabin and the barn. The door is open, Kate said, pointing to the cabin where the front door stood ajar, swaying slightly in the breeze. Rodriguez approached the cabin first, signaling for the others to stay back. After checking inside, she waved them forward. Clear, but someone has definitely been here recently. The interior of the cabin was much as it had been for years. Furniture draped with dust covers, personal belongings boxed and labeled by Kate during her periodic attempts to maintain the property. But now, drawers stood open, their contents disturbed. A bookshelf had been emptied, books stacked haphazardly on the floor. My God, what were they looking for? A noise from outside drew their attention, the sound of a vehicle approaching. Rodriguez moved to the window. Black SUV, coming up the drive fast. Thomas joined her at the window. That's like the vehicle I saw years ago. Same model, maybe even the same one.
"Everyone stay inside," Rodriguez ordered, moving toward the front door. "I'll handle this." Through the partially open window, Kate could hear snippets of the conversation. "Private property now. Sheriff's Department investigation. Court order if necessary." The older man handed Rodriguez something, a business card or document. She studied it, then nodded reluctantly and returned to the cabin. "They're from Horizon Development Corporation, and they have documentation showing they purchased this property from the county last month due to unpaid property taxes." "That's impossible," Kate protested. "I've kept the taxes current. I have the receipts." "They claim the last 2 years weren't paid. Their paperwork looks legitimate, but we can verify with the county assessor's office." "Convenient timing," Sam muttered. "What do they want?" Rebecca asked. "For preliminary work for a vacation development project," Rodriguez replied. "They have permits for initial surveying and ground testing. They've asked us to leave, but I informed them we're conducting an investigation into suspicious activity on the property. That buys us some time." "The garden," Kate said suddenly. "Thomas mentioned seeing strange lights in the garden the night before they disappeared, and the fresh tire tracks I saw yesterday led toward the barn, which overlooks the garden." They exited the cabin as a group, Rodriguez leading the way. The 2 men from Horizon Development watched with barely concealed annoyance as they crossed the yard toward the overgrown vegetable garden. "What exactly are we looking for?" Sam asked as they reached the garden gate. "Where the light touches at midsource sunset," Kate quoted from Robert's journal. "The garden faces west. On the summer solstice, the sunset would illuminate." She turned, orienting herself, then pointed to the far corner of the garden where a small stone bench sat beneath an apple tree. There, that corner would catch the last rays of the midsummer sunset. As they approached the spot, Thomas suddenly stopped, pointing at the ground. "Look at that." Almost invisible in the overgrown grass were small metal markers forming a circle about 15 feet in diameter, centered on the stone bench. "Survey markers?" Rebecca suggested. "No," Thomas said. "These are different. See how they're arranged in a perfect circle? Survey markers would form a grid or follow property lines." Kate knelt beside one of the markers, brushing away grass to reveal a small metal disc embedded in the ground. It bore no markings except a simple arrow pointing toward the center of the circle. "Something's buried here," she said, her voice barely audible. "I feel it." Rodriguez had been keeping an eye on the Horizon representatives, who were now approaching with determined strides. "Miss Walsh," the older man called out, "I'm Lucas Montgomery, Director of Acquisition for Horizon Development. I'm afraid you're trespassing on private property now." Kate stood slowly, recognition dawning. "You're the man who threatened my brother, the one he wrote about in his journal." Montgomery's expression didn't change. "I don't know what you're talking about. I never met your brother. Now, we have work to begin here, so I must insist you all leave immediately." "This is still part of an active investigation," Rodriguez stated firmly. "I've already called for additional officers." As if on cue, the sound of vehicles approaching echoed up the driveway. But instead of police cruisers, 2 large trucks appeared bearing the Horizon Development logo. Men in work clothes began unloading equipment, including what appeared to be ground-penetrating radar units. "What are you looking for?" Kate demanded. "What's buried here that you are so desperate to find or hide?" Montgomery's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold beneath. "Miss Walsh, your family abandoned this property years ago. Whatever conspiracy theories you've concocted are just that, theories. Now, our geological survey can proceed with or without your cooperation." Rodriguez stepped between them. "Not without a proper warrant, it can't. This property is now part of a potential criminal investigation." The younger man accompanying Montgomery produced a document. "We have court approval for our survey work, Deputy, signed by Judge Harrison yesterday." Rodriguez examined the paper, her expression darkening. "Judge Harrison is on vacation this week. This signature, is perfectly legitimate," Montgomery interrupted smoothly, taking back the document. "Now, unless you want to explain to your superiors why you're obstructing a legally approved development project, I suggest you all leave immediately." Kate felt a hand on her arm, Thomas pulling her back gently. "We should go, but we're not giving up." Rodriguez nodded her agreement. "We'll continue this through proper channels. I'm calling the sheriff now." As they reluctantly retreated to their vehicles, Kate looked back at the garden where workers were already setting up the radar equipment directly over the circular area they had discovered. Montgomery stood watching them, his phone to his ear, expression intense. "They know something's there," Kate said, as they regrouped by the cars. "Or something they want to find first," Rebecca suggested. Rodriguez finished her call to the sheriff's office, her expression grim. "Sheriff's tied up with an accident on the highway. He's sending another deputy, but it'll be at least an hour." "By then, they could destroy whatever evidence might be there," Sam said. "Not necessarily," Thomas replied, his weathered face thoughtful. "Ground-penetrating radar doesn't disturb the soil, it just creates images of what's beneath. If there is something buried there, the radar will find it before they can dig." Which might be exactly what they want, Kate realized. They're looking for something specific, something valuable enough to forge court documents and rush out here the moment we started asking questions. "The minerals Rebecca mentioned," Rodriguez suggested. "Maybe, but why focus on that specific circular area? Mineral deposits don't form in perfect circles. And why now, after all these years?" Kate's mind was racing. "Thomas, you said you saw lights in a pattern the night before they disappeared. What kind of pattern?" Thomas closed his eyes, concentrating. "Circular, I think. Multiple light sources arranged in a ring. At the time, I thought maybe Robert was setting up some kind of irrigation system with solar lights or something." A sudden commotion from the garden drew their attention. One of the technicians was calling to Montgomery, pointing at a monitor attached to the radar equipment. Montgomery hurried over, staring at the screen with intense focus. "We need to see what they found," Kate said, starting back toward the garden. Rodriguez caught her arm. "We can't interfere with their legal survey. But," she added, pulling out her phone, "we can document everything they do."
She began filming the activity from a distance. The workers had become animated, pointing at the monitor and conferring with Montgomery, who was now on his phone again, gesturing emphatically. "Something's happening," Sam said. As they watched, more trucks arrived, these bearing the logo of a private security company. Men in tactical gear began establishing a perimeter around the property. "They're locking down the site," Rodriguez observed. "This just went from suspicious to highly concerning." Her phone rang, the sheriff's office calling back. After a brief conversation, her expression grew even troubled. "The sheriff checked with Judge Harrison's office. He's definitely on vacation, and no development permits were issued this week. The document they showed me is a forgery." "So we can shut them down?" Kate asked hopefully. "Sheriff's sending multiple units, but they're still dealing with that highway accident. ETA, 30 minutes minimum." Thomas squinted at the activity in the garden. "They're not waiting. Look." The radar equipment was being hastily packed up, replaced by shovels and what appeared to be a small mechanical excavator being unloaded from one of the newly arrived trucks. "They're going to dig," Kate said, alarm rising at her voice. "They're going to destroy whatever's there." Rodriguez was already moving, striding purposefully toward the garden with her phone recording. "Mr. Montgomery, your court order has been confirmed as fraudulent. You need to cease all activities on this property immediately." Montgomery looked up, his face hardening when he saw Rodriguez approaching. He gestured to two security personnel who moved to intercept her. "This is a restricted area, Deputy. You have no legal authority here. Your court order is forged, and you're now trespassing and tampering with a potential crime scene." Kate and the others had followed Rodriguez and now stood in a loose group behind her, presenting a united front. Montgomery approached, his demeanor icy. "Deputy Rodriguez, you're making a serious mistake. We have legitimate mineral rights to this property that supersede any current ownership disputes."
then you won't mind waiting for the sheriff to arrive to verify your claims. In the meantime, no digging." For a tense moment, it seemed Montgomery might order his security team to physically remove them, but something in Rodriguez's unwavering stance, or perhaps the knowledge that they were being recorded, made him reconsider. "Fine," he said tightly, "we'll wait for your sheriff, but my team continues setting up our equipment." Rodriguez nodded, maintaining her position between Montgomery's team and the circular area they had been preparing to excavate. For the next 20 minutes, an uneasy stalemate held. Horizon's workers continued assembling equipment but didn't approach the circular area. Kate and her friends remained clustered near Rodriguez, watching every move. More security personnel arrived, taking positions around the property perimeter. "This is far more security than you'd need for a simple mineral survey," Rebecca observed quietly. "Because it's not about minerals," Kate replied, the pieces finally clicking into place in her mind. Before she could elaborate, the sound of multiple sirens announced the arrival of reinforcements. 3 Sheriff's Department vehicles roared up the driveway, followed by an unmarked car that Kate recognized belonging to Sheriff Donahue himself. The next hour passed in a blur of official activity. The sheriff, a tall man with a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed Rodriguez's evidence, confirmed the fraudulent court order, and ordered Montgomery and his team to cease all operations and leave the property. When Montgomery attempted to argue, producing documents supposedly proving Horizon's mineral rights, Donahue was unmoved. "These will need to be verified through proper channels. In the meantime, this property is now sealed as part of an active investigation. Anyone who attempts to access it without authorization will be arrested for obstruction of justice." Montgomery's face flushed with anger, but he had no choice but to comply. As Horizon's vehicles departed under the watchful eyes of deputies, Sheriff Donahue turned to Kate and her friends. "Deputy Rodriguez has briefed me on your concerns. If you truly believe there's evidence related to your family's disappearance buried on this property, we'll need to proceed carefully with proper documentation and forensic oversight." "How long will that take?" Kate asked anxiously. "I've already called the State Bureau of Investigation. They're sending a forensic team with proper ground-penetrating radar equipment. Should be here by tomorrow morning." "Can't we at least see what Horizon found with their radar? Before they packed it up, they clearly saw something that excited them." "Donahue considered this. We confiscated their equipment as potential evidence. Our techs might be able to retrieve the scan data." And so began the longest night of Kate's life. While the sheriff's department secured the property and set up floodlights around the garden area, Kate and her friends waited at Thomas's ranch nearby, too wired with anticipation and anxiety to sleep.
Shortly after midnight, Rodriguez arrived with news. "Our tech team retrieved the radar images," she reported, opening her laptop on Thomas's kitchen table. "And they found something you need to see." The group gathered around as Rodriguez displayed a series of grayscale images, top-down views of what lay beneath the garden soil. "This is from about 2 feet down," she explained, pointing to the first image. "You can see a perfect circle of dense objects, 6 of them, evenly spaced." The objects appeared as dark rectangles against the lighter background of soil. "Books," Rebecca breathed. "They're the right size and shape." "Continuing deeper," Rodriguez said, advancing to the next image. "At approximately 4 feet, we find these." The center of the circle now showed 6 distinct shapes, unmistakably human remains arranged in a star-like pattern, feet toward the center, heads outward. Kate stared at the image, her hand covering her mouth. 6 bodies, Robert, Natalie, and their 4 children. "There's more," Rodriguez said gently, switching to a different view. "This is a side profile view, showing the layering." This image revealed that each rectangular object, each book, was positioned directly above one of the human remains, separated by about 2 feet of soil. "It's a pattern," Rebecca said, "just like Robert's journal said. The truth is in the pattern." "But what does it mean?" Sam asked, his voice hushed with horror. Kate couldn't speak, her eyes fixed on the ghostly images of her lost family. Thomas placed a weathered hand on her shoulder, steadying her.
The State Bureau team will arrive at 7 a.m. They'll conduct a proper excavation with full forensic protocols. Kate, you don't have to be there for that part."
"Yes, I do," Kate replied, finding her voice at last. "I've waited 6 years to find them. I need to see this through to the end." The next morning dawned clear and cool, the Montana summer offering perfect conditions for the grim work ahead. The SBI forensic team arrived precisely at 7, a convoy of vehicles carrying equipment and personnel specializing in recovery of human remains. Kate stood with her friends at the edge of the garden as the team set up, establishing a grid system over the circular area and methodically removing the overgrown vegetation. Sheriff Donahue had agreed to allow them to observe from a respectful distance, understanding Kate's need to witness her family being found at last. The excavation proceeded with painstaking care. Top layers of soil were removed by hand, sifted for evidence, and documented. By mid-morning, they reached the first significant discovery, a textbook sealed in waterproof plastic 2 feet below the surface. It was a high school geology textbook, preserved almost perfectly. "That would have been Alexander or Andrews," Kate said quietly as a forensic technician carefully bagged the evidence. One by one, 5 more books were uncovered, each preserved in plastic, each positioned precisely in the circular pattern: an American history text, a children's astronomy book, a Bible, another geology text, and the book of religious poetry that Kate recognized as having belonged to Natalie. As the excavation continued deeper, the forensic team carefully documented and photographed the books before opening them. Each book had certain words underlined or highlighted, seemingly at random, just a word here and there, nothing that formed an obvious message when read sequentially. "It seems random, but look at this pattern." When they arranged the books in the exact circular formation they'd been buried in and noted the first letter of each highlighted word in sequence, moving clockwise around the circle, they spelled out HORIZON FORC.ED USD.dig.GRA.VS.PSALM.4-0-2. "Psalm 40, verse 2, Rebecca whispered. "From his journal. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire." "A brilliant code," Rodriguez said quietly. "Simple enough that Robert could do it under duress, highlighting words that would seem random to anyone watching him, but that would reveal the truth when arranged in the pattern they were buried in." As the excavation continued deeper, the horror of what had happened to them began to emerge. The Walsh family had been buried in the garden of their own homestead, arranged in a ritual-like pattern, but not by their own choice. Evidence of restraints was found on the remains, zip ties on wrists and ankles. Forensic examination would later reveal that all 6 had died from gunshot wounds to the back of the head. The books had been their final message. Robert's desperate attempt to tell the truth about what had happened to them, preserved in a way he hoped would eventually be discovered. By late afternoon, all 6 bodies had been recovered and respectfully transferred to the medical examiner's vehicles. Kate stood beside the excavated circle, tears streaming down her face as Rodriguez approached with a small evidence bag. "They found this with Robert's remains," she said softly, showing Kate a weatherproof pouch containing a handwritten note. "The forensic team has photographed it, but I thought you should see it." Kate took the bag with trembling hands. Inside was a note written in Robert's distinctive handwriting, the genuine article, not the forgery left in the kitchen table 6 years ago. "If found, know that we were taken by men from Horizon Development on July 6, 2004. They want our land for what's beneath it. They threatened our children to force compliance. They plan to bury us in our garden and stage our disappearance. Catherine, it's deeper than minerals. Look into underground facility plans. They have someone in the sheriff's department. Trust no one. I love you, sis. Robert." "Deputy Lawson," Rodriguez said grimly,
naming the officer who had led the original investigation. The one Thomas tried to tell about the strange vehicles, the one who left the department and moved to Arizona 5 years ago. Bought off by Horizon. Thomas growled. "We'll find him," Sheriff Donahue promised, having joined them. "This just became a multiple homicide investigation, and I promise you, Miss Walsh, we will not rest until everyone involved is brought to justice." In the days that followed, the truth emerged with shocking speed. Once armed with evidence of murder, search warrants were executed on Horizon Development offices. Records revealed a conspiracy that went beyond simple mineral rights. The company had discovered that the Walsh properties sat atop not just valuable minerals, but a geological formation perfect for a classified government installation. A deep underground monitoring facility planned in partnership with a defense contractor.
When Robert refused multiple offers to sell, the company had decided the family needed to disappear in a way that wouldn't raise suspicions. They had forced Robert to write the note about visiting Uncle Joseph, then murdered the entire family and buried them in their own garden, believing the bodies would never be found. What they hadn't counted on was Robert's intelligence and foresight. The circular arrangement of books and bodies had been his idea, not something his captors would have bothered with, but something he knew would appear deliberate if the land was ever surveyed. The waterproof packaging of the books, the coded message hidden in the highlighted words, the note found with his remains, all were his desperate attempt to tell the truth from beyond the grave. The county assessor's office investigation revealed that a Horizon-linked employee had been altering tax records, marking Kate's payments as undelivered, and generating false delinquency notices that were intercepted before they could reach her. As Deputy Rodriguez explained, "We checked with the county assessor's office. Your payments were properly recorded and receipted, but someone in their office filed false delinquency notices afterward. We've identified an employee with financial ties to Horizon." Lucas Montgomery was arrested at an airport trying to flee the country. Former Deputy Lawson was extradited from Arizona. In total, 8 people were charged with crimes ranging from murder to conspiracy to obstruction of justice. The government contract for the underground facility was exposed and canceled amid public outrage. 6 months after the discovery, Kate stood in the garden of the Walsh homestead one last time. The property would not be sold now. Instead, with help from the community and a substantial settlement from Horizon's parent company, it was being transformed into a memorial garden, an educational center, focusing on homeschooling, sustainable living, and the values Robert and Natalie had embodied in life. Where the circular grave had been, a simple monument now stood, 6 stones arranged in a circle, each bearing the name of a family member. In the center, a 7th stone carried the words Robert had written in his journal, "The truth is in the pattern." Rebecca joined Kate by the monument, carrying a small box. She said the library board approved it. "We're establishing the Walsh family collection of homeschooling resources. These are just symbolic copies, but I thought you might want to place them." Inside the box were copies of the 6 textbooks found with the family. Not the originals, which remained in evidence, but identical editions. Kate took them one by one, placing each on the corresponding memorial stone. The circle was complete once more, but now in remembrance rather than concealment. "They're at peace now," Rebecca said gently, "and the truth is known." Kate nodded, looking out over the property where wildflowers now grew among native grasses, where children from local schools came to learn about nature and history, where the story of her family would be preserved, not as a tragedy, but as a testament to love, courage, and the power of truth to emerge even from the darkest places. "The pattern was always there," she said quietly. "We just needed the right technology to see it, to hear what they were trying to tell us from beneath the ground."
As they walked back toward the renovated cabin, now serving as the main building, Kate thought about all the missing persons cases across the country, all the families still waiting for answers, still hoping for technology or circumstance to reveal what happened to their loved ones. Some truths remain buried for years, decades, even centuries. But with persistence, with love, with the refusal to forget, and sometimes with the help of ground-penetrating radar and books arranged in a perfect circle, even the most deeply buried secrets could eventually come to light. In a world where stories of missing persons often ended without resolution, the Walsh family had somehow, against all odds, managed to tell their story from beyond the grave, and Kate had been there to listen when the time finally came for their truth to be heard.